Now we're going to be working on the body and we're going to create some arms. The first thing I'm going to do is I want to divide the body into a couple of different parts, and I also want to apply some different fill colors to the body itself. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my elliptical tool. I'm going to go ahead and change our fill and stroke to none to start off with. And then I'm going to draw a circle, and I'll hold down my shift key to constrain the proportions. If you add your space bar, you can reposition the circle as you're drawing it. So I'm just going to kind of move this, and what I want to ultimately do is create a circle that will allow me to divide the bottom section of this shape into its own separate piece. If we need to modify this, I think I want my circle to be a little bit flatter at the bottom. We can make adjustments. And as you can see, because I have no stroke and no fill, it makes it a little bit easier for me to picture what is going to happen. I'm going to select both of these shapes and we'll just horizontally align the centers. And then I want to make sure that this shape is big enough so that it does not cut through the top portion of the shape. I only want to divide this bottom portion of the shape. That looks pretty good right there. And the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to select both shapes, and then we'll go ahead and we'll use our divide function. And as you can see, it just creates this bottom section to be its own little shape. What we will do next is we're going to actually create a secondary cut on the bottom portion as well. So once again, I'm going to do the same sort of thing. I'm going to use a circle, and I'll draw a big circle. I'm holding down my space bar so I can kind of reposition this, and I'm just going to create a little bit of a segment because we're going to just slightly change the color at the bottom of our robot. Remember that you always want to release your mouse first and then your modifier keys. I'm going to scale this up and let's reposition it slightly. I just want to make sure that it is encompassing the entire top portion of our shape. And let's select everything and we'll just use our horizontal center align once again. So that looks like a good place to trim this. I'm going to select this. Once again, we'll use the divide function. And as you can see now, I have two little sections at the bottom. And then the final thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use my pencil tool, and I'm going to just kind of make a swoosh that follows this sort of pattern right here. And remember, if this shape is not to your liking, you can always modify it using the smooth tool. The shape to me looks a little rough, so rather than just smoothing it out, I do want to show you one other thing you can do with the pencil tool. So I'll delete that shape. If we double click with the pencil tool, it's going to open up the pencil tool options, and I'm going to just increase the smoothness. We can also do things like choose to fill new pencil strokes. We can close paths when they're in a specified pixel amount. And we can also edit selected paths when we're in a specified pixel amount. But I'm just going to up the smooth, and then I'll click OK. And once again, I'm just going to kind of make this S-type shape. And that looks much better. We can still go ahead and use our smooth tool. I don't like how pointy this top part is, so I'm just going to smooth that. And in addition to using the smooth tool, remember that we can always go back with the pencil and just kind of redraw that segment of the shape too. So this is another feature that we have available. So I like that, but it just needs to extend a little bit farther. So I'll just go ahead and draw that out. But that looks pretty good for my purposes. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the group selection tool and select this S shape in addition to the upper part. And you can see that we have some circles. Those are just residual types of shapes. So let's delete those first. I'm just going to tag the outer part. And if we just hit delete right here, we can just remove those. And now I can just get this upper portion of my shape plus the top portion of our robot. And once again, we're just going to use divide just to divide this into separate shapes. So now I have the shapes all set. We will go ahead and we'll fill with some various colors. I'm going to use the group selection tool to select this right hand part of the body. I'll open up my swatch palette, and we're going to go ahead and get the teal color, but I do want to augment this slightly. I want it to be a little bit more blue. So I'm just going to open up my color picker by double clicking, and we're going to get a slightly more blue type of shade like this. And we might as well just go ahead and add this to our color palette because we might want to reuse that later. And then I'm going to select the other side of the body, and I'll fill with the same color, but I do want to make this a little bit lighter. So I'm just going to double click, and then we'll just go ahead and get a slightly lighter shade of this blue. Next, I'm going to add some colors to the bottom part of the robot body. So I'm going to select this bottom section, and we're going to use our light gray here. And then I'm going to select the very bottom section, and we're going to use our medium gray. So now I have all the colors in place. And what I want to do now is I just want to stroke around the outer portion. I don't want all these inner strokes. So in order to do that, I'm going to actually select this whole shape and copy it. We'll just go ahead and create a copy. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the edit paste in place. So we're making an exact duplicate copy and pasting it in place. If I move this to the side, you can see how we have identical copies. I'll undo that. And now we're going to use our unite function to unite this into one shape, and then we'll remove the fill. This will allow me to just have control over the stroke on the outer portion. Now I want to remove the stroke on the inner portion, and at this point it might be a little hard to select some of those things. We could use our group selection tool or our direct selection tool and select the entire thing and then just shift click on the outer part, which should just give us the background part. So if we come here and we select our stroke and remove it, you can see how the stroke is removed. So that is one way to accomplish this. And the other method of being able to accomplish this, I'll just do undo really quickly, is to open up our layer panel. We haven't really been working with layers, and currently everything is on one layer. In Illustrator, because everything's vector, you can twirl open your layer and you'll have access to all of the little pieces. So this path right here is our upper stroked path. This right here is our grouped fill of the body, and then this is the lower gray portion of the body. If I want to select these two parts of the layer, we can actually just click on this little target icon right here, and that will allow those things to be selected. I'm going to hold down my shift key and select on the gray portion, and then in my toolbar I can go ahead and specify that the stroke color is set to none. And if we turn our outer stroke back on, you can see that now we are able to fill the inner parts and then still retain our outer stroke, which is what we want. That kind of does the trick for the body. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create some arms. We can do this using a number of tools. I think I will use my curvature tool. So I'm just going to click some points, and it doesn't really matter where this is because we can always move it, but I want to kind of create like almost like a hot dog type of shape. So I'm just going to begin clicking. I'll start off with the side, and then I'm going to move down to where the tip of the hot dog shape should be. And you can see as I move around, I'm able to kind of create this sort of shape. So I'm going to come up here like so. We'll create another point right here, and then I'm just going to move here. And we'll come around a little bit, and then we're going to come back to the original point and close the path. And if this isn't quite what you want, remember we can always access the direct selection tool, and we can just start to manipulate the position of these points. We can manipulate the handles a little bit, and ultimately what I want here is I want this to kind of look like a sausage a little bit with maybe a slight bend. Like that. All right, that's looking pretty good. And just so we can see this, let's just turn a stroke on. I'll just fill it with the default stroke and fill colors. We don't really need to augment that. That looks good, but I want it to be a little bit bigger. So I'm just going to switch to my direct selection tool and just kind of unproportionately and maybe proportionately scale it a little bit so that we can just make it slightly bigger. And we also want to rotate this maybe like this, so it kind of is pulling out of the robot's body. If we want it to have a little bit more bend, I can select these bottom points right here and just kind of pull these over, and you can see that I can kind of like almost like I'm creating a little arm. So that looks pretty good. Next, I'm going to use my pencil tool again, and I'm just going to draw two lines that kind of intersect this shape. So there's my first line, and then here is going to be my second line. And again, if these aren't to your liking, you can always use the direct selection tool or the group selection tool or any of the other tools that we have available, and we can make some modifications to the particular line and kind of massage it into the shape that we want. But that looks pretty good. So now I have that in place. I'm going to select the entire thing. And right now I'm using my direct selection tool. So I've only selected the bottom portion. I'll go back to the group selection tool and then just tag everything so that I know that all of the points are selected. We're going to once again perform a divide just like we did before. And this time, actually, before we do this, let's save ourselves a little bit of work. Let's select our outer shape, which is the hot dog shape. And I'm just going to copy it. So I'm just going to use the keyboard shortcut of Command or Control C, just so that it's saved in my clipboard. And then once again, I'll select all of these elements, and we'll use the pathfinder and we'll use divide. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the various parts, and we're going to apply our various shades of gray. So the upper part of the arm is going to have a gray fill. And right now I'm on stroke, so I'm going to swap those and get rid of the stroke altogether. I'll select this bottom part, and once again, we don't want a stroke, so I'll get rid of the stroke, and then we'll come to the fill, and let's use our darkest gray that we created. And then this middle part of our hot dog is going to have our mid-tone gray, and I'm going to once again get rid of the stroke. Like so. So we're just kind of creating a little bit of a gradiated portion on the arm. Now that I see these colors in place, I realize that these are just a little bit darker than what I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my swatch palette, and we'll go ahead and modify these colors in the swatch palette. So I'm going to select my lightest color and double click. And numerically, I'm just going to type in values that I want to use. So we're going to change this to, let's try 221. If all of these items match, then the grays will update. And then for the middle one, I'm going to double click and we'll use 182. And then for the bottom one, let's go ahead and double click. And this one maybe just needs to be a little bit lighter, so let's try 135. Okay, I like that much better. So we're just kind of creating a couple different shades of gray that we want to use right here. And remember that we had made a copy of the original shape, the sausage shape. Now that I have the fills all set, I'm going to use my edit, and we'll use paste in place, and that's going to paste it, and then we'll just turn the fill off so that we just have the stroke like we had discussed before, and I'm just going to change the stroke weight to 1 point. So that's looking pretty good. The next thing we want to do is we want to create some segments here. So in order to do this, I'm going to select this outer stroke portion of the arm, if you will. We're going to go ahead and use our draw inside, and now I'm going to grab my pencil tool, and we're just going to make some swipes so that we can kind of create some segments. And you'll see that the segments are only going to show up within the shape of the arm, which is kind of nice. We don't have to do anything special there. So I'm just going to kind of draw a couple of these in so that there's some little segments along our arm. And we'll do one more down at the bottom right here. Great. So even though the lines are extending out past the shape, because we're using draw inside, they are not going to do that. The other thing that I'm going to do is we're going to use this tool right here, which is our variable width tool. So with the variable width tool, we can actually click on a segment, and if we click, hold, and drag, we can actually kind of create these variable widths. So because these would essentially be like maybe like rubber joints in which the arm could bend, I kind of like the idea of having them not be just a standard width. I think that they would look a little bit better if they had a little bit of a variable type of width. So I'm just clicking on these points, and then I just click, hold, and drag out. And I'm placing the point in which I'm dragging kind of at the bottom of the shape. And remember, if you don't like the way this looks, just click undo and redo it again. Like this one seems a little thin, so I'm just going to click on this and just going to drag this out again and get the exact shape that I want. So I like that. I think that looks really good. It kind of creates a little bit of a different sort of effect that we have right here. And then we're going to make like a little grabber claw, if you will. So I'm going to use my circle tool, and I'm just going to kind of make a elliptical type shape. And right now I'm actually on the draw inside, so let me just delete that and let's get out of that mode. We'll just double click to escape from that mode, and let's just draw a circle. So I'm just going to draw an elliptical type of shape like so, and then we're going to draw a little bit more of a perfect circle, and I'll select both of these shapes right here. I'm going to align to the center, and if I want to make any sort of modifications to this, so I'm just going to select this inner circle and bring it down, and we're just going to kind of make like a little bit of a hooked shape right there. Let's maybe bring this up a tiny bit like so. That looks pretty good. And then we're going to select these two shapes, and we'll use our minus front, which is going to give us our little grabber hook. I'll use my eyedropper tool and sample this fill color. And then in this case, I do want the stroke. I'll just double click here and add a black stroke. There we go. And now I'm going to select this, and we're going to place it down here, just on the bottom part of our arm. I'm going to want to rotate this a little bit. So with my regular selection tool, I'll go ahead and just rotate this out. And of course, if we needed to adjust the size, we could go ahead and squish this down a little bit and reposition it in the appropriate area. So let's maybe make it like that. All right, that's looking pretty good. So I'm going to select this entire arm segment, and we'll group this together. And then I'm going to use my object arrange, send to back, because I want this to be behind the body of our robot. And let's just kind of tuck it back here a little bit more and maybe rotate it out a little bit like so. So that is looking pretty good. And then I'm going to create a reflection, a copy. So I'll go to my reflect tool. It's located underneath rotate, or we could use keyboard shortcut of O. I'm going to hit return, and we do want to create a vertical reflection. We'll select copy, which is going to give us our copy. I'll come to my selection tool and just hold down my shift key and drag this out to the right hand side of the robot. It has two little arms like so. And that's looking pretty good. Let's grab our eyeballs, and we might as well group these together. So I'm just going to use the keyboard shortcut of Command or Control G, and you can see that they're behind, they disappear. That's because we made them and then we worked on this shape and it got brought to the front. So I'm just going to use Object Arrange, bring to front like so, and I'll hold down my shift key. We're going to make these quite a bit larger so they just kind of have some big googly eyes on our little robot, so we can really check stuff out and see what's going on. And maybe I just want them to like extend off the body a little bit, so we'll go ahead and do something like that. That's looking pretty awesome, I think. And the last thing that we're going to add is kind of like a little antenna. So for this, I'm going to create a circle, and I'm going to create a little tiny mini circle, and we'll change the mini circle to have no stroke. I'll make the fill color just white. And right now, because I have the bounding box on, it's a little hard to grab this, so you might need to zoom in. It's so tiny. I'm using Command or Control plus to zoom in, and then I can just grab this shape, and I'm just going to place it right here, just so it has like a little highlight point, like so. And then the final thing that we're going to do is we're going to add the little kind of antenna. So I'm going to use my pen tool, and I'm just going to draw something that kind of looks a little bit like a lightning bolt. So I'm going to click here, and we're just doing straight line segments. So this should be real easy, and we'll come down like this maybe. And let's go ahead and apply a stroke. So I'm just going to do a stroke and a fill, and then back out the fill, get rid of that. And just like we did before, let's use our variable width tool. So I'm going to switch to this width tool, and this will, I think, just make this look a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and stretch out the edges of the lines right here to make them a little bit thicker and just make them a little bit more visually interesting. So we'll come to this middle segment right here, and I'm just going to grab that. You can always grab these points too and just drag them down, since I want this to be a little bit more linear in nature. And maybe we'll just do a quick adjustment on this little part up here. So we'll just maybe do a little scaling of that. That looks pretty good, I think. And now I'm just going to grab this, and I'll just kind of notch this to the top of the head of our little critter. I'm going to scale this up just a tiny little bit, and then we'll just use Object Arrange, Send to Back. So let's use Command or Control 0 so that we can really see what's going on, and I think that looks pretty good. I think our robot maybe just needs like a little shadow that's going to follow it around, so I'm going to do no stroke, and for the fill color we'll grab one of our grays. Let's go to the swatch right here, maybe just get the mid-tone gray. And the final thing that I'm going to do on this little kind of like shadow that is going to show, we'll just kind of drag this down, is I want to soften the edges a little bit. So with this shape selected, we're going to go into Effect, and we're going to go to Stylize Feather. And with the stylized feather, it will allow us to create a little bit of a radius. So you can see when I do this, if I have preview checked, I can kind of see what's going on. So I'm just going to do maybe like 2, and then it just kind of softens the edge. So maybe that needs to be a tiny bit bigger. I'll hold down my Shift and Option key so it scales out from the center, because I like the position. And there we go. So that looks great. We're getting real close here. We're just going to add a little bit of texture next, and I think our robot is coming together pretty nicely.